I was 17 the summer the town felt smaller than usual, like someone had tightened the borders just enough that the air had to squeeze to get in. My mother said that's how heat works in July. It makes everything crowd you. Maybe she was right. It was the kind of heat that turned the pizza den's boxy little kitchen into a sauna that smelled like burnt cheese and cheap pepperoni. The old window unit wheezed like a smoker and coughed out air the temperature of a yawn. Nights at the den were slow, but Mr. Geller insisted on staying open till 1 for the bar crowd, which was funny, since the bar crowd in Sandfield was 3 men in fishing caps arguing about bass. On slow nights, he'd lean on the counter with a pencil behind his ear and say things like, "Hustle's a habit, Chris." I'd nod and mop the same patch of floor where the soda syrup never truly dried. The delivery car, if you could call it, that was a sun-bleached 96 Civic with an oil leak that stained the asphalt out back in the shape of a broken wishbone. The AC had died sometime around the Bush administration, and every time I drove it, the radio turned itself to AM stations where preachers told me I was probably damned. The ceiling fabric hung low and brushed my hair like a tired hand. I told myself it was all part of the charm. I told myself a lot of things that summer. Around 10:30, the phone rang. I picked up with my customer voice bright. Fake, a flashlight in a damn basement. Pizza Denver. This is Chris. What can I? The voice on the other end belonged to a woman who spoke like she was chewing ice. Large cheese. Extra sauce. 2 orders garlic knots. Cash. Name. A pause. Put it under Emerson. Address? Another pause, longer. Old Mill Road. Last house on the right. I pinched the phone between my shoulder and ear and scribbled it down. That your big gray farmhouse? The one with the... She hung up. I looked at the ticket a second too long. Mr. Geller snapped his fingers. Clock's running. Right. I boxed a pie, tucked in the garlic knots, and slid everything into the thermal bag. The bag smelled like 10 years of other people's kitchens. I grabbed the keys off the nailboard by the time clock. They were warm, like someone else had just used them. Sandfield doesn't have much. A hardware store, a laundromat that doubles as a meeting spot for divorced dads, 2 churches that hate each other politely, and the creek where people pretend to fish so they can drink in peace. Old Mill Road spins off Main like the line you draw when your pencil slips. We used to ride our bikes out there when we were kids, throwing rocks at the rusted-out hulk of the actual mill. My friend Mason swore a guy hanged himself from the mill wheel in the 70s. Mason swore a lot of dumb things. The first half-mile was streetlights and porches with wind chimes. Then the lights spread out, like neighbors who'd argued and decided to stop speaking. The cicadas were a thick electric chorus in the trees, and each time the road dipped, the Civic bottomed out with a protest. I rolled the window halfway down and let the warm air slap my face. There's a bend in Old Mill where you can't see what's coming until you're already inside it. That's where I saw the police cruiser parked crossways, nose to the ditch, blocking the lane. Its lights weren't on. The driver's door rested open, dark as a mouth. I slowed to a stop a car's length away and blinked at my own reflection in the red and blue decal. My first thought was that there had been a deer in the road or a drunk farmer asleep at the wheel. Then the officer stepped out, tall, broad, hat brim casting his face in night. He walked to my window with hands out to his sides like he was approaching a skittish animal. The nameplate on his chest caught a smear of moonlight. R. Warren. I'd never seen him before, and in Sandfield that's unusual. He moved like he'd never had to rush anywhere in his life. I set my elbows on the window. Evening, officer. Is everything. You're from the pizza place, he said. Not a question. Were you headed? I lifted the thermal bag from the passenger seat. Old Mill. Last house on the right. Large cheese, extra sauce, plus garlic knots, he finished, like he'd already read my slip. He stared past me at the dashboard clock. Turn around. Sorry. Turn around, son. He said it gently, like a nurse waking someone before dawn. Roads closed past here. Is there an accident? Because my boss. He leaned in. The brim shadowed his eyes, and the smell of his uniform sun-baked polyester and some faint, sharp cleaner crowded the car. You don't need to be out here tonight. Turn around. Take Maine back to the den. Tell your boss you got rerouted by law enforcement. If he's got a problem, he can call the station. I waited for the part where he smiled and said, just doing you a favor. He didn't. He looked like a man keeping a door shut with his foot. I tried to hand him the ticket. He didn't take it. I've got cash on delivery, I said, hearing how weak it sounded. In the bag, the pie shifted, and the smell of hot cheese puffed out. It felt obscene, somehow, to be holding something as stupid as pizza in the middle of a conversation that was tilting strange. The officer's jaw worked. What's your name? Chris. Chris, I'm telling you, don't go down there. He straightened up and looked past me, down the black ribbon of road. I'll escort you to the turn. The radio in his cruiser hissed, then one of those soft, lonely whispers that come through when someone's holding the talk button but hasn't decided what to say yet. He turned his head without moving his feet. The radio hissed again, then clicked off. He reached inside his car, shut the door with a soft thunk, and came back to my window. Turn around, he repeated. I should have turned the Civic around and let it groan back to Main Street and told Mr. Geller the officer wouldn't let me through. But there's something about being 17 and broke and tired of being told what to do by men who feel like they built the town with their bare hands. And there was a part of me that felt challenged, weirdly, by the way he was making this bigger than it had to be. The last house on the right, a large cheese. That was all. Can I at least call the customer? I asked. He took a breath. Behind him, the night hummed. No. Why not? Because you don't want to get involved. He said it like it was a favor, a coupon for 10% off my future. He took a half step back and touched 2 fingers to the brim of his hat. Turn around and go home. He waited. I nodded, put the Civic in reverse, and eased back until I could perform a lopsided 3-point turn. He watched me. When I pointed the car back toward town, he stood still another second, then walked past my bumper and into the empty lane I'd been heading for, stopping in the exact middle of the road like a gate. He stayed there as I crawled away. I drove 50 yards before thought, took my hands by the wrists and turned them. In the rear view, the officer was a thin black cutout against the gray. I killed my headlights. The road went soft around me. I pulled onto the gravel shoulder and let the engine idle. The Civic ticked and clicked as it cooled, like a clock in the walls. In the bag, the pizza kept breathing garlic into the car. I watched the officer's silhouette. He didn't move. The cicadas didn't care. Somewhere in the fields, a dog barked like a breaking branch. It took a long minute for my heart to decide on a speed. When it finally slowed, curiosity got brave. I cracked the door and slipped out, leaving the keys in the ignition and the dome light off. Heat slid under my shirt like an extra skin. I crouched behind the car, then around it, and eased down the ditch, moving through burrs that hooked my socks and stabbed my ankles. The gravel felt loud under my sneakers, but the officer didn't turn his head. He stood, a statue of no. I tell myself now that I only meant to look, that I'd peek around the bend and see a downed tree, a truck, something ordinary. But the night beyond the bend had a different texture, like the air there had been used too many times and was thin as a bedsheet. It drew at me. I slid along the ditch, letting the high grass swallow me. An owl wheeled once silent and vanished into black. At the crest of the bend, I paused and looked back. The officer was still in the road, hands at his sides, head tipped like he was listening to something almost too quiet. From here, I could see his cruiser's antenna tremble in the faintest breeze. My mouth was dry. I went over the crest and, hunched low, looked down the stretch toward the last house on the right. That's when I saw the lights. Not police lights. Not house lights. A thin line of them, Two by two, low to the ground like eyes in tall grass stretching far than the road, had any right to go. They were too steady to be fireflies, too even to be headlights. A thread of tiny flames nested in glass, two by two, low along the ditch like a runway for something that didn't fly. I couldn't see hand that had lit them or smoke, just the dull orange beads riding the dark. I breathed in, and under the hot, dusty scent of weeds there was a faint sweetness wax gone soft in the heat. From a bend, Old Mill Road went narrower, as if embarrassed, the asphalt scabbed with patches that reflected the stars. The candle jars ran along both sides toward a deeper pocket of night, where I knew the Emerson place had to be. When we were kids, we dared each other to touch their mailbox because it had a brass faceplate shaped like a bird with a nail through its heart. Adults whispered about foreclosures and bankruptcies. Kids turned it into other rumors. I'd never been down there in the dark. I dropped lower and moved along the ditch, keeping to the high grass where it bowed over the jars. The officer stayed where I'd left him, a straight-back shadow posted against the idea of progress. If I cut through the field instead of the road, I could skirt him. The field was soybeans ankle-high rows that muffled my steps and whispered against my jeans. Crickets clicked like old slide projectors. Once, something small darted away from my shoe, and I froze so hard my knees trembled before I could convince my legs to continue. The farmhouse announced itself in pieces of rectangle of roofline, a spare, square chimney, the suggestion of a porch smothered in vines. One upstairs window glowed a soft, lamplight yellow. Everything else was dark. In the yard, a plastic kiddie pool turned upside down, a toppled lawn chair, a bicycle with one wheel bent like a blinking eyelid. The jars led to the front steps, set close together now. Light doubled and doubled again on the peeling white paint of the risers. I crouched at the fence line and listened. Under the cicadas there was another sound low, like many voices pressed together into one. Not words, but the shape of words. The kind of noise churches make when a prayer is more felt than spoken. It seemed to seep from the house and the ground and the space between. I told myself it was a TV somewhere, volume down, some midnight preacher sweating at the camera. I told myself a lot of things. The screen door creaked once and held. A figure filled it thin, a woman in a pale dress that hung wrong on her shoulders. Her hair was the color of milk left too long in a metal pitcher. She didn't step out. She just stood there and let the candlelight draw her edges. My mouth went dry and then remembered to swallow. Pizza Den? The voice matched the phone cold, clipped a spoon tapping ice. I stood up before I could make a better decision. The fence had once been wire, but now it was more memory than metal. I found a gap, slid through, and came into the yard with a thermal bag held like a peace offering. Large cheese, extra sauce, garlic knots. You came anyway. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't anything I could name. She held the door as if it could decide to bolt at her back. Leave it on the porch. I'm supposed to. I started, then shut up. I climbed the 3 painted steps that were more paint than wood and set the bag on the mat, which said welcome in letters so worn they looked like the ghost of the idea of welcome. Up close, the jars were jelly jars and spaghetti sauce jars, the labels scraped off with half success. The flames danced on draft from the door. I could see the woman's eyes then, a gray that wasn't one color so much as a refusal to be one. She slid a bill through the gap of the screen. It was the exact amount, folded twice, edges softened with use. I took it because my hand didn't know how not to. Keep the change, she said. There isn't. Keep it. Behind her, the house breathed. It's a ridiculous thing to say, but that's what it felt like. The slow, patient inhale of boards and plaster and whatever the dark contains. I tried to see past her shoulder. The lamp upstairs was the only light. I caught a corner of a frame on the wall, the kind that holds a school portrait. The hair rose along my arms for no good reason. Is this for a gathering? I asked, nodding at the jars. The question felt like stepping into a hole you hope is shallow. Don't go back the way you came, she said. I blinked. Excuse me? Don't go back the way you came. The screen's mesh turned her face into tiny squares. Behind her, something shifted an impression of a sleeve, a longer shadow, a male voice from deep in the house, the kind of deep you only get in old places. Did he see? Her hand tightened on the doorframe. Go, she said to me. Quick now, like the word was a match head. Please. I took a step backward, then another, careful not to kick the jars. The porch board sighed under my weight the way old people do when they stand. At the yard's edge, I turned to skirt the field again, aiming to hit the road past the officer. The soybean plants parted around my shins with a little hiss, and the candle's glow fell away like I'd slipped out of a circle. Halfway to the ditch, a flashlight stuttered to life to my left nose. Not a flashlight, because it didn't beam. It just bloomed. The officer was standing in the field, not in the road, not where I'd left him. The light came from his hand, but didn't show a source, only around a pale across his chest and jaw. His hat brim cut a sharp horizon across his face. You didn't listen, he said. The words were mild, the way some men mention the weather. My legs decided to become unreliable. I left it on the porch. They paid. I'm going. He tilted his head like the angle mattered. They always pay. The radio on his shoulder cracked and hissed. A long, empty exhale, then a voice flattened by distance. Unit 19, hold your a smear of nothing, no response at station. The officer didn't reach for the mic. He let it hiss against his collar. Officer Warren, right? I said. It felt like a rope thrown at the dark named someone, and they can't be as strange. He didn't confirm. He kept looking over my shoulder toward the house, as if counting. You'll take the creek path, he said. Follow the soybean rows until you hit the cottonwoods. Don't look back. If anyone calls your name, don't answer. I'm not. I began, and the house behind me made a sound like a zipper closing. Go, he said, with small urgency I hadn't heard before. Now. Something moved in the yard. I just crossed quiet, but not quiet enough. The brush of fabric, the careful test of foot on grass. I didn't turn to see it. I ran. The soybeans slapped at my shins as I pushed through them, their whispering leaves loud in my ears over the sound of my own breath. The ground was uneven, soft in some places and stone-hard in others, the kind that wanted to trip you if you forgot to watch where you stepped. The air thickened the farther I got from the candles, like I was wading through a space that didn't want me in it. Behind me, there were footsteps. Not one set, two, maybe three, uneven, as if whoever they belonged to hadn't decided whether to walk or run. They were careful at first, matching my pace. Then I heard the first one break into a jog, and the others followed. I didn't dare look back. The officer's voice stuck in my head like a thorn. Don't look back. If anyone calls your name, don't answer. The rows ended abruptly, giving way to a stand of tall cottonwoods. They rose like a black wall ahead of me, their tops swaying gently in the night breeze. Somewhere in their shadow, I could hear the faint trickle of the creek. I ducked into the trees, the ground immediately cooler underfoot. The moonlight broke into strips through the leaves, silver slashes across the dirt. The sound of water grew louder, but so did something else soft, almost wet breathing, like someone pacing their inhale to match mine. A branch cracked to my right. My body spun before my brain could veto it, but there was nothing there, just a knot of roots and the gleam of a spider web strung between them. Then, Chris, it was my mother's voice. Perfect. Not like an imitation, not like a recording, like she was standing right behind me. Warm, tired, with that upward curl she got when she wanted to coax me into listening. My heel twisted in the dirt, almost turning me around, almost making me answer. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek until the taste of iron filled my mouth. I ran faster. The creek appeared between the trees, silver and narrow, with a makeshift plank bridge laid across it. Someone had nailed the boards together from whatever scraps they could find 2x4s, worked paneling, even a section of old picket fence. The whole thing bowed under my first step, groaning like it might fold in half. But I didn't stop. Halfway across, something hit the water just downstream with a heavy splash. I froze, eyes darting into the dark flow. At first, all I saw were ripples. Then something pale broke the surface fingers, impossibly long, dragging through the water as if tasting it. They curled, slow and deliberate, before sinking out of sight again. The plank under me shook. Not from my weight, something else was stepping on. I lunged the last 3 feet and hit the far bank, so hard I stumbled onto my knees. I scrambled upright, my jeans damp and heavy with mud. Ahead, the trees thinned, opening to a slope that led back toward the outskirts of town. A streetlight buzzed in the distance like the promise of safety. The voice called again, softer now, farther away, but still my mother's, "Chris, you forgot something." I didn't break stride. When I reached the edge of the trees, I finally stopped and looked back. There was nothing on the bridge. The creek was still, its surface dark and blank. But on my side of the bank, right where I'd landed, the mud held a single fresh footprint. It wasn't mine. It was longer than my shoe by at least half, the heel narrow, the arch impossibly high, as if whatever made it had more in common with a bird than a person. The street light at the edge of the cottonwoods hummed like an insect pinned under glass. Its orange halo felt almost holy after the darkness I just left. I stepped into it and stayed there longer than I needed to, letting the light soak into me like I could wash the last 20 minutes off my skin. The slope leveled into a dirt path that spat me out behind a chain-link fence near the old grain silo. From here, the town unfolded in familiar, harmless-shaped square houses with sagging porches, the flicker of a TV through someone's blinds, the steady white glow of the laundromat sign. My heart slowed to something human again. I took the long way back toward the pizza den, avoiding Old Mill entirely. My sneakers squelched with every step, the mud in my cuffs cooling into a crust. The night air felt different here, no sweet wax, no whisper soybeans, no phantom breath on the back of my neck. Just a warm tang of asphalt and the occasional whiff of fryer grease from a late-night burger stand. When I finally rounded the corner to the den, the place looked just as I'd left it. Lights buzzing inside, Mr. Geller's old Ford parked out front, and a moth the size of a small bird battering itself against the front door. Inside, the smell of tomato paste and scorched crust hit me like a wall. Mr. Geller was behind the counter, elbows deep in the cash register. He didn't look up. That took you long enough. I dropped the folded bill on the counter. They paid exact. That got his attention. He glanced at the bill without touching it, then at me. Emerson Place? Yeah. His mouth did a twitch I couldn't place, half smirk, half wince. Thought they'd moved out. I didn't answer. He shut the register and started counting the bills again, slow and deliberate, like he was giving me time to fill the silence. I didn't. "You take the road the whole way?" he asked finally. "No." I wasn't sure why I told him the truth. The officer stopped me, told me to turn back. Mr. Geller's hands froze over the cash drawer. "What officer?" "Tall guy. Hat. Name tag," said Warren. He stared at me for a long second, then closed the drawer with a soft click. "There's no Warren on the force." I almost laughed, but something in his tone iced the back of my throat. Well, whoever he was, he knew I had the order, knew the garlic knots, even. "That's so." Mr. Geller picked up the bill I brought back, rubbed it between his fingers, then set it down like it was damp. "You see anyone else out there?" I hesitated. A woman answered the door. Gray eyes. Said to leave it on the porch. Mr. Geller leaned on the counter and fixed me with a stare that made the hum of the fluorescent lights louder. "Next time that address comes in, you tell them we don't deliver that far. Understand?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. The rest of the shift dragged. No more calls came in. The pizza smell settled into my clothes, my hair, my skin. Every so often, I'd think I heard the faint hiss of a police radio outside, but when I checked the window, the street was empty. At 1 a.m., I locked up, dropped the keys on the nailboard, and stepped into the night. The Civic was the only car in the lot. I got in and just sat there for a moment, letting the silence press in. That's when I saw it tucked under my wiper blade, fluttering slightly in the warm breeze. A strip of paper, torn from something larger. No writing, just the greasy outline of a handprint, faint and smudged, like someone had pressed down hard with fingers slick from pizza oil or wax. I left it there. I drove home with the wiper note, still clinging to the glass, its greasy print swaying each time I hit a bump. The Civic's headlights carved the streets into little tunnels of pale yellow, and every time the beam hit something reflective of a stop sign, a cat's eyes, it pulled me back to those jars on Old Mill Road. My apartment sat above the hardware store, a narrow one-bedroom with a window that looked out over Main Street. I parked out back, killed the engine, and just listened to the tick of cooling metal. Inside, I kicked off my mudcake sneakers and dropped on the couch. I should have showered, should have tried to sleep, but my brain was still chewing on the night in restless circles. The voice in the trees, the pale hand in the creek, the officer who knew my name without asking. Finally, I got up, pulled my laptop from under the coffee table, and opened a browser. Sandfield PD's website was outdated, but it had a page listing the current officers. No Warren. I thought maybe I'd misread the tag in the dark. I searched the names. Anyway, no one who even came close. No tall man in the roster photos matched the square shadow I'd met on Old Mill. That unease had been humming low in my ribs all night turned sharper. If he wasn't on the force, then what was he? I typed Sandfield Police Officer Warren into the search bar. One result, buried in an old scanned newspaper from 1984. The headline, "Local Officer Disappears in Search Near Emerson Property." I clicked. The article was short. Officer Raymond Warren, 32, had gone missing while investigating a disturbance on Old Mill Road. Last seen by a fellow officer walking toward the Emerson House shortly after midnight. No sign of struggle, no body found. The official search ended after 3 days. There was a grainy black and white photo, even blurred. I knew the tilt of that head, the brim of that hat. It was him. Same height, same build. The timestamp in the article chilled me. July 17th, 12:14 a.m. That date, it was today, just 41 years ago. I shut the laptop and just sat there, my apartment suddenly too quiet. Outside, Main Street was empty, the occasional moth batting against the street lamp. I was about to stand when something made me freeze. From the street below, faint but unmistakable, came the slow crackle of a police radio. Not from a car. From directly under my window. I stepped to the glass. There he was, Officer Warren, standing in the middle of the street, looking up at my building. No flashlight, no cruiser, just the brim of his hat, cutting his eyes into shadow. And in his hand, one of those jelly jars, flames swaying inside, just bright enough to light the oily shine of the handprint still stuck under my wiper. I froze at the window, holding my breath like that might make me invisible. Warren didn't move. The candle flame in the jar swayed with the night breeze, painting his jaw in strokes of orange and shadow. His other hand rested at his side, fingers twitching slow, like he was counting something only he could hear. I backed away from the glass. The floorboards creaked under my heel, and for a moment I swore his head tilted toward the sound. My first thought was to call the police, but what would I even say? Hey, there's an officer outside who's been dead for 40 years holding a candle he probably stole from a haunted farmhouse. Yeah, real solid. I tried to wait him out. Sat on the couch, lights off, listening. The low crackle of the radio drifted up from the street's soft hisses, an occasional word that sounded like it came from underwater. Minutes passed. My heart began to believe he might leave. Then a knock at my door. 3 raps, slow, deliberate. My apartment is on the 2nd floor, and there is no exterior stairwell. The only way to my door is the interior staircase from a hardware store's back room, and I hadn't heard a single footstep on it. I stayed where I was. The knock came again, harder this time. "Chris," the voice said. Not loud, but it didn't need to be. It rolled under the door like smoke. I clenched my fists so tight my nails bit my palms. Don't answer. Don't look back. His own advice turned against him. Another knocked and the sound of something small and glassy setting down on the floor outside. The smell hit me instantly. Hot wax, faint and sweet, exactly like on Old Mill Road. I crept to the peephole. The hallway was empty. Just a jar, flame burning steady, sitting in the middle of the welcome mat. I should have left it there. Instead, I cracked the door just enough to reach out and pull inside. The glass was warm against my skin. The flame shivered but didn't go out. Inside the jar, melted into the wax, was something black and fibers too small to be cloth, too stiff to be hair. The moment I touched it, the room went cold. My breath came out in short, white bursts. Then I heard it, not from the hallway, not from the street, from inside the jar. Whispering, faint at first, like the hiss of a match, then words threading together in a voice that wasn't Warren's and wasn't the woman's that said my name, over and over, pulling at it, stretching it into something that didn't quite belong to me anymore. The air shifted, and I knew without looking that I wasn't alone. The shape in the corner of the room was darker than the shadows, tall and thin, edges wavering like heat above asphalt. It had no face, but I could feel its attention, a weight pressing behind my eyes. The whisper in the jar rose to a low chant, and then, from somewhere far away but rushing closer, came another voice, sharp, commanding, "Put it down." From the porch. I turned. Warren stood in the doorway, hat brim low, radio hissing. For the first time, I saw his eyes flat gray, same as the woman's, but burning with urgency. "Now," he barked. I dropped the jar. The glass didn't shatter, it burst, spilling wax and fire in all directions. The shadow in the corner folded in on itself and vanished, leaving only the smell of scorched sweetness. When I looked back, Warren was gone. The wax cooled into crooked amber shapes on my floor, each with a faint impression like something had tried to crawl free before it hardened. I swept it up with shaking hands, dumped it into the trash, and didn't sleep a second that night. By morning, the rational part of my brain had started doing damage control. Maybe I'd been overtired. Maybe my brain had folded in some leftover campfire smoke into a bad dream. I'd explain away the jar, the voice, even Warren himself, if it meant I could walk into daylight, without feeling like something was still looking at me. But when I left for work, the jar was sitting on the hood of the Civic. Empty, clean. Mr. Geller was unusually quiet when I came in. He didn't mention the Emerson order, didn't ask about my route. It was almost like he was waiting for me to bring it up. Around noon, I caved. "You know something about that place, don't you?" He kept working the dough, pressing it flat with his palms. People have been telling stories about the Emerson place since before I was born. Like, what? He looked at me, the flour dust turning the creases around his eyes into pale cracks. That it's not the house that's bad. It's what's under it. I frowned. Like a basement? He shook his head. Like a hole that's been there longer than the road. They say the family used to leave things for gifts, offerings. And if you didn't feed it, it took. He wiped his hands on his apron. Back in the 80s, a kid went missing. Last person seen going that way was Officer Warren. They say he went in to look for the boy and never came back out. But I stopped myself. Mr. Geller noticed. "Saw what?" I swallowed. "Nothing." He gave me a long look. "Whatever you think you saw, Chris, it's better not to talk about it. Things like that, they hear you." That night, I told myself I'd go straight home after work. Avoid Old Mill entirely. But when my shift ended and I slid behind the Civic's wheel, my headlights caught something in the lot. A jelly jar. No flame this time. Just a folded slip of paper inside. I pulled it out with 2 fingers. careful not to touch the glass. The paper was old, edges browned, and on it was a list written in blocky pencil. 1. Large cheese, extra sauce. 2. Garlic knots. 3. One sole, unmarked. Below that, in smaller writing, last house on the right. My stomach went cold. A voice behind me steady low. You're on the list now. I turned. Warren stood in the dark, just beyond the reach of the headlights. He looked thinner than before, his uniform hanging loose, his edges fraying like a photograph left in the sun. I kept you from it once, he said, but it doesn't forget. I tried to ask what it was, but my mouth wouldn't form the words. You'll stay away from Old Mill Road, he said, but sooner or later it will send for you. And when it does, his voice cracked like the radio static he carried. Run toward the creek. Don't let it call you by your name. Then he was gone, like someone had wiped him from the air. I stood in the lot holding the paper, the night feeling too still. And from somewhere far down Main Street, faint but clear, I saw them again 2 by 2, a line of tiny orange flames, swaying in the dark. It had been 12 years since I'd last seen the line of jars. I'd left Sandfield, traded the sagging brick of my apartment for a place in the city, took a job where my nights were spent under fluorescent lights instead of summer stars. Most of the time, the Emerson House felt like a dream I'd just stopped telling myself, until the call came in. I was visiting my mother July again, same crushing heat. She'd gone to bed early, and I'd stepped outside to smoke. The street was still, the air holding that heavy stillness, right before a storm breaks. That's when I saw them at the far end of the block, faint but burning steady. 2 by 2, stretching away from me, leading off into the dark. The smell hit me before the memory fully caught up. Warm wax, sweet enough to turn the stomach. My fingers tightened around the cigarette until it snapped in half. And then my name, not shouted, not whispered, just said, like someone had been standing behind me all night, waiting for me to finally turn around. Every muscle in me tensed toward the voice. It was warm, familiar, my own voice, older, calmer. It promised safety. It promised answers. Run toward the creek. Warren's warning cracked through my skull like a whip. My legs took over before the rest of me caught up. I bolted, cutting between houses, vaulting a chain-link fence, my bare feet catching on gravel and weeds. The jars moved with me, appearing at the edges of my sight no matter how I turned, each one flaring a little brighter as I passed. I hit the tree line, the darkness folding over me, the smell of wax now so strong it was like breathing candle smoke. The creek's voice was ahead, a low chuckle of water over stone. I ran harder. That's when I heard the other footsteps. They weren't chasing me. They were pacing me, just out of sight. Each step matched to mine, sometimes on my left, sometimes my right, sometimes above. The branches overhead creaked without wind. The water came into view, silver and slick under the moon. The plank bridge was still there, sagging with age. I hit it at a sprint, the boards groaning under my weight. Halfway across, I looked down. The water wasn't moving anymore. It was black and still like a mirror, and in it, I saw the reflection of the jars, hundreds of them, stretching out in every direction, burning under the surface like stars drowned in oil. And then something reached out of my own reflection. It was my hand, same knuckles, same half-healed scar on the thumb, but longer, thinner, skin the color of old wax. It brushed my ankle, and in that single touch I felt the pull not just on my body, but on my name. Somewhere, far behind me, the voice called again, my name perfectly spoken. I ran. I don't remember how I got across the bridge, only that I was on the far bank, knees in the dirt, lungs shredding themselves for air. When I looked back, the creek was moving again, and the jars, both real and reflected, were gone. But every summer since, on the hottest night of the year, I catch the smell of warm wax in my sleep, and I know the last house on the right is still waiting.